Let's bring in our man, who's going to be a very, very busy day for him, Mr. Allen Trieu, one of our national recruiting directors here on 24/7 Sports. Allen, good morning. How are you?
Morning, Sam. Yeah, I look forward to this every year. I let my hair down in the morning for you, and then I go look presentable the rest of the day. So it's an interesting year this year with the calendar being the way it is. So it feels a little bit more. Everything's a little more scrunched in than usual.
That's not a figurative. He's letting his hair down. That's a literal. His hair is down.
Yeah. Well, folks, when they watch this, folks who are watching this on the video, they'll see his hair is literally down. Obviously, we would normally start with Bryce Underwood. We'll go to the 5-star wonderkind coming up, but I feel like it's fitting that we start with Nate Marshall, since that's the new news, the fresh news, the hot news off the press, that he decided to flip back from Auburn to Michigan, Allen. And here's the deal: this was a sort of a connection that Lou Esposito, it never actually went away. The contact had been maintained. Now, it did heat back up more intensely here in recent days and really hit a crescendo over the last few days leading up to the flip.
Yeah, like you said, connection never went away. Even the day that he flipped to Auburn, he talked to Esposito even that day after it was already announced, and the lines of communication have stayed open. And then I think it really ramped up. I hit right around the time there was that big rush that Bryce Underwood was a part of. I know Nate at that point reached back out to the staff, started talking to them, but even then, he just took an official visit to Texas last weekend. When you talk to insiders around Auburn, they had a feeling he wasn't going to be in the class. But even at that point, it sounds like internally at Auburn, they were expecting, well, if he doesn't come here, he's going to go to Texas. There wasn't a lot of this is going to go Michigan's way. So both Texas and Auburn felt like it was between the two of them at the last second here. I think with Michigan, what made the difference is just their approach. And I think Espo's personality and the way that he recruited him. There are some coaches don't take it well when you don't pick their school and you continue to visit other schools. That never was the case here. And I think if you've met Nate, you've talked to him, pretty low key kid. I don't think he responds well to that other kind of recruiting. And I think that helped Michigan a lot here.
Yeah, man. It was there was no scorned lover kind of reaction from Espo. And no high pressure. I mean, as as things sort of re-engaged, there was no like, hey man, high pressure tactics. There wasn't that. It was, hey, there's a home for you if you want to be here. I think it helped that you had some other connections. I know Keem Miskdeen from the basketball staff, close family friend, was involved as well. I think that helped. That connection helped too. And then some friends in the class. It's not lost on me that when you go back and you look at his, guys that he said he was going to try to help recruit when he was, back before he was in the class. I know he said, hey, I'm going to try to help recruit, for instance, Jordan Young. That was a dude who he said he was going to try to help recruit. Look who's in the class now, for instance, right? So it just, things come full circle. And I think, he looked around and it just feels like this was a comfortable setting for him.
Absolutely. It's also, I think, a little bit fitting in that one of the big early wins for Sherrone Moore as an assistant coach was when he helped with Dax Hill at the last minute. And now you have the symmetry here. I can't remember another one where a guy flipped back where it was like this. That's the closest thing to this. But I do think, you get momentum too. And I do think that the class momentum, kids certainly see it. I think Nate noticed it, saw it, certainly probably saw the way the defensive line played down the stretch, and especially in that last game against Ohio State. There are a lot of things moving in Michigan's favor here, but I think it's because the tenor of the recruitment and the way that they dealt with him never changed. That was the foundation for all of that.
So what about his game? I mean, I talked about it, man. You get just super enamored, at least with me. His upside is through the roof, Allen, and you can get two taken away with that because upside doesn't always equate to production. And I know it wasn't all that's kind of the case with Nate a little bit, at least if you watch some of his early tape, but his end of year tape, like his late year tape, looked pretty good. So you being the scout and the rankings guy, how would you say Nate's tape sort of matches up with his upside?
I think that it matches. And when you look at his senior year, I mean, he was the Catholic League, Chicago Catholic League Player of the Year, which that's no easy feat, especially if you're not a quarterback or a skill guy who's touching the ball all the time. That's an accomplishment. So that tells you that the production was there. With defensive linemen, when you talk about upside, but also, it's an athletic position. You want, especially if you're going to play on the edge, which I do think is the initial plan for him. You want guys who have the athleticism to play that position. And Nate has, NBA bloodlines. His grandfather played high level basketball. His dad played college basketball. Pretty sure mom was an athlete, but so you like guys who have that. You will like guys who have that multi-sport themselves. Nate, very good basketball player. You like edge guys who maybe can play some other positions. If you watch his tape this year, including some key plays where his team needed a third or fourth down conversion, he was split out and they were throwing him the ball and he was tracking it down and catching it, which is not typical of a 6'4", 260-ish pound guy. So he checks a lot of the boxes. And where we previously may have said, he's got such a high ceiling that the production hasn't gotten there yet. I don't think you can say that anymore after what he did as a senior.
Yeah, he's a tremendous freak athlete. I don't think that's, I think that's thrown around a lot. I think with Nate it fits. He's a freak, and so a guy who, rankings wise, I think his ranking fits, but I also think he's a guy that when all is said and done, you can say, man, he can outperform it because he has that kind of athleticism. When all is said and done. So now let's come back around and talk about QB1, number one player in the country, Bryce Underwood. We've watched him since he was knee high to a bullfrog, Allen, and the buzz, the hype was there coming in, and the kid has lived up to it. He's done everything he is everything they said he was going to be, and then some.
Yeah, so we've talked a million times. You can watch the tape yourself and see the arm and see the athleticism, the size. All of those things are very apparent to even an untrained eye. I think that's the part of it that maybe doesn't get talked about enough. How hard it is to be considered this anointed as early as middle school and then into high school, begin high school as a freshman who has offers, varsity starter, then you win a state title. That's the bar you've set for yourself as a freshman. And then towards the end of this process where all eyes are on him in such a big way, the microscope was really on that kid. And you do in that way have a lot of people kind of trying to poke holes, trying to find reasons that you aren't the number one guy. And I think the fact that he's held that spot and held that for really since middle school, like you said, the mental part of that, the mental makeup it takes to do that. I don't know that everybody realizes how hard that is to do. I've seen a lot of kids crumble under the weight of that. That's never happened with Bryce. He's very unflappable is the right word. He's always been the same, kind of the same approach, the same kind of tone whenever he's on the field, whether it's a camp, a 7-on-7 or a game. And that's the part that's impressed me the most is just how he's handled all of the potential outside distractions and kept playing football.
Yeah, that's an unbelievable will and ability to step up and live in the moment and not have it be too big for him. Like a lot of kids are overwhelmed by it, and it's never been that way with him. I've marveled at that. And then the other thing, to have all the accomplishments that he's had, Allen, to a couple state championships out the gate, to be this 5-star guy, all these accolades, and then to watch him lose a game as a senior, regular season game, and for it to still matter. I was like, I mean, he was like distraught, tears, like it was the worst thing ever. And I was like, wow, that registered with me. Like, okay, that means something. That registers with me.
Absolutely. And throughout his process, he's not a Hollywood kind of guy. He hasn't leaned in to all of the celebrity of what he's had. Still very much propped up some of his teammates, trying to help some of them get recruited. And like you said, the losses, he takes them not only like he doesn't like losing. It's like you said, it's almost an extreme level of I don't like losing. Same thing with last year's state title game. We watched how he reacted, which was the first loss in his high school career. And so, yeah, I mean, like I said, the physical attributes are all there. We've talked about that for 4 years now, the arm, the way he can run. But I think the intangible stuff gets glazed over too much when you break down what kind of a prospect Bryce is.
All right, so before we move on, just real quick, player comp. You've had some time to think about it now. You got a player comp for Bryce yet?
No, this year I haven't had time to think about it because it's been so busy. So no, I don't have a good one, and I don't know that. And we've had this debate within our staff. I've talked to people who have been in the industry, people who coach, people all kind. Nobody seems to can't settle on one really, really good comp for him. And you know what? I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, I think you're right because he can throw it. He really showed this year. I mean, we knew he could run, but he really showed this year like he can run. He can really run. So, but he not to the point where he's not Vince Young. I just give me a break. I digress. Let's go back into let's move on to the next one. Because he's not the only big timer in this class. We're talking to Allen Trieu, 24/7 Sports national recruiting analyst. Andrew Babalola is another, freak, the highest rated offensive lineman in the history of the program, the number 2 offensive lineman in the country, the number 11 player overall, Allen. He's an animal, Andrew Babalola.
Yeah, so this is one where I think some people think a 5-star means a guy's just going to walk in and play right away. I don't think that's the case here, but I think that you're looking at in terms of the ceiling and what he can be. If he's getting his name called by Roger Goodell in 4 years, will not be a surprise at all. So came over from basketball, had zero basis in American football, had not played it, had not really watched it. But even early on, he came over from basketball. It was the spring going into his junior year. So it was the end of his sophomore year. And he participated in some scrimmages. And that film alone got him Power 4 offers. And that's because of his combination of size, athleticism, the feet from basketball. But the thing that impressed coaches immediately was his physicality. And that's what you always wonder about when a guy comes over from basketball, hasn't played football, is how does he take to that part of it? And he's still an extremely nice, academic, kind of mild-mannered kid when you meet him. He's definitely not that way on the football field. And that was the question mark when he came over is, well, is this guy going to hit anybody? And it became apparent almost right away that, yes, he will hit somebody. So I think if all goes well, you look at ceilings, we say that word a lot in this class, but for him, I think it's an accurate description of what he can be because he's a really, really good high school player. Let's not get that wrong, but there's still so much meat left on that bone.
Yeah. I described him as he brings basketball athleticism with a brawler's mentality. He's a brawler. He finishes people. That's what you want to see with an offensive lineman. He's a finisher. So I think he's an animal. You're right. You think, start from day one. You don't see that with offensive linemen. But Allen, if he put it this way, if he could put on 25, 30 pounds, I wouldn't rule out him competing. I mean, because you got to consider the offensive line situation he's stepping into. That factors in as well. He's not stepping into the it's not like there's a whole lot established on this offensive line right now.
Sure, and I do think that what's funny about him is, like I said, did not grow up watch. So when he first starts getting offers, he gets, I think Iowa State is his first. He doesn't know Iowa State from Northwest Missouri State, I don't think, at that point. And so he starts researching these schools, but it was a very academic decision. And then I think as the process went on, he started to think more about, well, like, how can I be developed football wise? But him thinking about that came later in the process. And I think choosing Michigan, you have Grant Newsome, and then obviously you have a head coach who has been an offensive line coach, played the position, coached it very well as an assistant coach. I think that ended up being a bigger part of his decision late in the process than it was early on.
Right. All right. So moving down, man, another kid. Now, when I first saw him, I saw him playing receiver, but he's excelled at safety. Michigan looking at him in nickel. There's some talk he could play corner. I just thought that this was a guy you take as a program take, because I think he's an absolute ball player. I'm talking about Elijah Dotson out of Belleville High School. I just love the kid as a football player, Allen. I don't even describe him as a positional guy. I describe him as a football player, and a damn good one at that. What say you?
Yeah, so it's funny to say that a top 125 player in the country is maybe a little bit overlooked, but I actually think that's a little bit the case with him. And I think there's a little bit of, well, he committed the day before Bryce did, or the same week, and they were on the same roster. And I think we're the only ones that have him that high. But I don't know that he's even getting enough attention as like that he's a major part of this class. I think he's an impact player. I think he's a guy that if he adds a little bit of weight could factor into the equation right away. And like you said, just every phase of the game. I really think if he had just played receiver full time, and he didn't go both ways, he could have led the state in receiving this year. But that wasn't what the game plan, the makeup of the team called for. And to his credit, he did what he was supposed to do. That, and again, you have an athletic guy who's played some corner, he's played some nickel, he's played deep safety, he's played receiver. Is he going to be physical when he needs to be? And he's one of the biggest hitters in the state, maybe in the region. I mean, he came this year. If you watch some of the clips of him coming into the box and striking somebody, he will knock somebody out now. I've watched him do that. I know the Howell game that we were at, he came all the way across the field and laid a massive hit. So he's not just a guy who's a receiver that you convert over that won't come down in the box and be a hammer. He's a pretty complete player.
Yeah, contact courage, because he's, you look at him, he's maybe 175 pounds, maybe. And so you see that and see his contact courage at that weight, and then project him in a college strength and conditioning program with 25 pounds on him. You're like, yeah, just wait.
You know what's funny? I talked to his dad this week for a signing day feature, and his dad said, I played at Bowling Green, but I came in, I was 180 pounds, and I played linebacker, but I'd hit people. Said I got everything out of my size, and it kind of went in my head. I go, oh, okay. Now that makes a lot of sense now. I get it.
Right. Apple didn't fall far from the tree in that regard. Talking to Allen Trieu, 24/7 Sports national recruiting analyst. So let's move down. One of the earliest guys in the class, Birmingham Groves. Big Avery. Was Avery the first guy? Was Avery the first guy to commit?
Bobby Kanka, I think, was the first guy.
Kanka was the first guy. So let's talk about Avery.
Okay, so what you said about Babalola being a brawler, and this is nothing against Andrew Babalola. Avery Gach may be the biggest brawler in this class. I mean, the kind of guy that opponents are complaining about the entire game. I go to his games, and it's like the opponents are complaining at the ref almost every play because this guy is going into the way he's driving them into the bench. He's burying guys. He's going through the whistle. There is it's something to see. I mean, it's actually a pretty entertaining tape if you watch some of this. It reminds me a lot of Ben Bredesen's high school tape. That was the first, even before he picked Michigan. I said, this reminds me of when I was watching Ben Bredesen in rural Wisconsin, just throw guys over the opposing bench. And I think that's what you have here. And so, I think that's the mentality you need to play offensive line, and especially in the Big Ten. He's going to bring that. Also, another guy who ended his senior year really strong. Groves really they got to the state semis and lost a heartbreaker that would have got them into the state title game. I really think that he was a massive part of that and played both ways as well, played defensive line. I think he's going to give Michigan the ability to move him up and down the line of scrimmage wherever you need him. I think he can play some tackle. I think he can play some guard. So we'll see where he best fits in. But he brings you that versatility. But at the end of the day, all of that, the main thing with him is that this guy is going to beat the guy up across from him for the entire game.
Yeah, you gotta love it. He brings you that mentality for sure. So you put him in Babalola, man, you are getting some nastiness on the offensive line. And then you mentioned that we went to the Belleville Howell game. And so Bobby Kanka is going to give you some pit bull nastiness on the defensive line. So what about Bobby?
Yeah, he's played both ways his whole high school career. Dad is a Hall of Famer at Hillsdale, played a little bit in the NFL, and Bobby's just he's been a football kid his whole life. Knew about him going into high school, even in middle school. There was talk of him being this next great prospect out of that area, and I think he's really come in to his own. Defensive line has played some outside. I think he's going to end up as an inside guy. There's some schools that I think thought he could be a draft pick on the offensive line as well. So that tells you what kind of a player he's been. You talk about him, and as you mentioned, brings some lunch pail mentality, but I think he's a better athlete than people give him credit for. And you were at the Belleville game when they needed a fourth down conversion, key part of the game. They threw him the football.
They did.
And Elijah Dotson was on him, and he made the catch. And in 8th grade, he played tight end, and he still has continued to play some tight end. And so, yes, I think Bobby may be underrated as far as his athletic ability. And you can see that this year he had some interceptions, made some plays in space. That's a guy that, again, maybe we don't, when you talk about this class as a whole, you don't bring up Bobby Kanka a lot. He kind of quietly committed early and just quietly went about his business. That's a better pickup than I think maybe the on paper class shows.
Talking to Allen Trieu this morning, starting blocks of the early signing period today here on the Michigan Insider on the Big 1050 WTKA online on the big1050.com. So one of the flips, Allen, a few weeks ago out of Newburgh, Indiana, Benny Patterson, that the Wolverines were able to get from Cincinnati. So what about Benny Patterson? What can the Wolverines expect? And what are Michigan fans anyway? I know what the coaches think. What can Michigan fans expect from Benny Patterson?
Yeah, I think the way that recruiting goes these days, you recruit guys so early that what schools always lament is the loss of senior eval. We don't get to watch these guys develop. We don't get to offer guys who we're catching them on the rise late in their high school career. I think Michigan got that in Benny Patterson. And part of that was some of the changing defensive board. Nate Marshall almost kind of did them a favor in allowing them to evaluate some of these guys, get Benny Patterson in the class. Then Nate Marshall comes back. But that's what you have with Benny Patterson. He was committed in Northern Illinois earlier in the process, then flipped to Cincinnati because they weren't in the picture prior. And then he makes this huge leap as a senior, grows a little bit, has outstanding tape, and all of a sudden he's looking at USC trying to get him on an official visit, Florida State, LSU, Michigan, and he was going to look at a lot of those other schools, had some other visits planned, takes a visit to Michigan and ends the process. So you're catching a guy definitely in the middle of his rise. There, you talk about still having meat on the bone with some of these other recruits. That's definitely the case with Benny Patterson. He went from a MAC commit, nothing against Northern Illinois. They did do a great job. But he exploded as a senior, and I think Michigan did a great job of getting him committed before it exploded even further, because I don't think it was stopping at that point.
Right. And so then you move on, and a young man that, man, I remember watching this dude as a freshman at CC? I don't even think he was a freshman. He might have been an 8th grader. He might have been an 8th grader the first. So he was headed to CC the first time we saw him. Right? Talk about Kaden Strahorn. Now he's at IMG Academy now. So this is way, way, way back in the day. But he was outstanding. And I remember watching him thinking, this dude is going to be big time. And then I remember thinking, once I met his dad, oh, there's no way Michigan's going to be. There's just no way. There's no way Michigan's going to be able to be in the mix with him. And I talked to his dad, Jason Strahorn, Michigan State, right? His dad was like, oh, he's going to go through his recruitment. He's going to go through his recruitment. He's going to be open. He's going to be open in the process. And they were true to his word. He was open in his process. And Kaden Strahorn, Michigan State legacy, is on his way to the University of Michigan, Allen Trieu.
Yeah, and we didn't mention those. Avery Gach, both his parents went to Michigan State too. So I think that says something about the way this staff approaches recruiting. And we talked about it with Nate Marshall. It's the same thing with Kaden Strahorn. They never thought we're going to not recruit this guy, or we're going to recruit him differently because of who his dad is or where his parents went or what the recruitment looks like. And it paid off in this case. And a credit to the kid and his family too for being open to that. But as a player, yes, started immediately as a freshman at CC. You don't see that very often at CC. They do not start a lot of freshmen. In fact, I'm struggling to remember if there's been another one in the time that I've been covering recruiting. We've seen a lot of great recruits come through there. I don't remember another guy starting as a freshman, especially on the offensive line. And then I think he was playing tackle at that point. I think he found the right spot in that Michigan's going to bring him in as a center. I think he's going to be an outstanding center. And I think part of that is his physical ability, but he's got the mental makeup. Dad played. He's gone down to IMG, where it's really like a prep school. It's a training ground. I think the mental side of playing center, having that guy be the quarterback of your line of scrimmage, I think Kaden's going to be very, very prepared for that. So in addition to 4 years of varsity experience, having played great competition at IMG, being very technically sound, I think the intangible, the mental side of it, he's going to be the ideal fit as the man in the middle for Michigan.
And I don't quite know where your region stops or starts. Do you go down into Tennessee with Eli Owens?
I don't have Tennessee.
Okay.
No,
nope. You don't have Tennessee.
They keep trying to expand my region every year, but I think I'm drawing the line at Tennessee's not in the Midwest. We can't. I take enough flack about Kentucky being in the Midwest that I won't add Tennessee also.
I got you. Well, Allen, man, appreciate your time.